Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker. Happy Sunday to you.
Indeed, Mikey, glad to be with you, and thanks to all of you tuning in for Lead Better. You've done us a kindness. You've done us a favor by clicking to watch or listen, and that's actually the topic of today's Field Note, which is Field Note 1634, Why Granting a Favor Makes You Like People More. So if you have granted us this favor by participating, we hope you like us more.
Right. Okay, so I'd like to jump in on this by making an observation about mafia bosses and crime families. Because
that's the natural way to begin talking about this.
Yes.
I think it's yeah, okay. You're so predictable.
The more I learn about admired leader behaviors, what admired leaders actually do, and what counts as an admired leader behavior is something that is universal, that seems to transcend all races or ethnicities, right? And
time periods, continents.
Yeah. I'm also recognizing that another commonality with admired leader behaviors is that it's the exact opposite way that a mafia crime boss might do it. And this is a good example of like doing it the opposite way. Because most crime bosses, as you've seen portrayed on television or will do you a favor first, right? And then the best approach is never to accept a favor from a crime boss because you don't want to ever owe them anything, right? And so the fact that this is doing it in the opposite way, basically saying, we are going to ask people if they could do us a favor first, right? Because that increases the likability. But I love what it actually does with this mafia crime boss kind of scenario. Because I don't want to act like a crime boss in the hallway of my organization by doing you a favor, and now you owe me a favor, right? And I don't know when, but at some point in the future, I'm going to call on you, right? And it feels sinister just in the way that you describe it. But instead, I'm going to give a reason why I'm doing a favor for you. It might feel just as spontaneous, might make me feel like I'm granting you with something, but I already owe you a favor because I've asked you to do me one already, right? And so now there's not this suspicion anywhere about the favor that I'm doing for you.
Yeah, and I do think the Field Note addresses a little bit of both sides of this, right? There is the element of the leader who might have someone do them a favor that's on the team, and that increases. But it may also be the leader doing small favors or things that are helpful to other people. And I think that, even in the reference to the Ben Franklin effect, which is long sort of known, there's a real power to this. It was actually one of the earliest lessons I remember learning, in my early 20s from a mentor of mine. And I'll talk about that in a second. But what we do know is that the counter research shows that this is true unless it is actually perceived as manipulative, right? And that's a very easy thing to pick up on. If you think somebody has asked you to do them a favor and you're like, I think they want something bigger from me later, and they're just trying to get, in my, graces in some fashion, then it can backfire.
Yeah, this is why I think that naming something the Ben Franklin effect kind of lowers the credibility in whatever is the thing that you're going to be suggesting to me. Because I have the tendency to think of Ben Franklin as a manipulative guy. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So anybody who would actually argue in their newspaper on both sides, like creating a foil where they would do both sides.
But that was very. They all did that back then. I mean, there was a little bit of that. There was a tradition of doing that.
I know. I would just
like to think. They would also go duel. They.
I know. I just would like to think that the person that I'm accepting advice from wouldn't resort to that kind of tactic, the kind of thing that everybody else is doing. So
well. Look, here's how I've watched it out in practice. I'm trying to think if I'll probably edit out this name. So there's someone well-known, very well-known author, and they are known to our firm and to our founder. And I believe at one point this person purchased a ranch. This was an intellectual influencer, but not a business person, not known for that, but certainly very, very accomplished. And our founder, Randall, also has a ranch in southern Utah. And he advised this other person that that as they got to know the people in the community, and ranches aren't right on top of each other, right? I mean,
Right.
there's that's why it's a ranch. That the ability to have and our founders sometimes will loan out equipment to other people that might need it in that community. And he was saying, look, that works in this case too, which is you could have like a tractor or something that you offer to other folks. That could be that you need a piece of equipment. These are all good things that actually do bring about sort of understanding and deeper connection. And well, what's the goal? Just being a better neighbor, right?
Yes.
So some of that is what happens in these circumstances, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. There's just a degree of generosity that's involved in it. Now, can you use it in a? I wouldn't say manipulative. I think it could actually be strategic.
Yes, it is strategic, and I like that word because I like relationships, and I like to get my relationships to the point where they are interesting to me, right? And I think what I mean by interesting is that there's a reciprocal nature to them. Like, you respect me as much as I respect you. You're thinking about me as much as, if not a little bit more than I'm thinking about you.
Yeah. Or the ideas or whatever we're communicating about. Like that, taking the other person seriously about what they're saying, and that they're taking you seriously.
And so there are times that I might be more interested in a relationship with you than you are with me. And it's not a weird thing. It's just my awareness of where we are in our relationship stages means that I know that I need you to be more reciprocal. You might not be aware of that, and that's fine. I'm going to take the lead on this, and maybe the best way I can take the lead is by asking you to do something for me. Like maybe you just haven't even thought of it. But what I'm doing is,
help me out on this thing. Yeah.
Yes. And what I'm doing is I'm opening up the door on your ability to easily reciprocate where you might not have been spending any time thinking about that.
I mean, that could be, and it doesn't mean like I say, I need you to draft, a document for me. It could be, could you review this document?
Yes, right.
Like something like that. And I've seen that. So let me put this through the lens of how I've experienced it and then see if you can find out where it can apply to folks. But I remember early on, I had this mentor, and I was probably in college, and he was giving me advice. We'd met through an organization. He was probably 10 years older than me. He'd already been fairly accomplished, was deputy assistant secretary of commerce when he was 30 years old, had 4,000 people reporting to him. This is back in the early 80s. And I remember him saying, that Machiavelli said, and I later learned it was a paraphrase, men are as much bound by the benefits they confer as those they receive. And so, the idea of just,
and
go ahead.
Once again, another person to be a little bit suspect of when you're following their advice, right?
Yes, but whether it's, now that's not actually advice. That's actually says, is this an observation of human nature? And so what I found, and he was saying, you can use this. Now, we all know in the venture capital world and in Silicon Valley and everything, there's this idea that if you want money, ask for advice.
Right.
And
and the other way, if you want advice, ask for money.
Ask for money and people will give you advice. And that's such a truism that people just see through it in those worlds. Like, so if I say, hey, I've got an idea for a new business, can you give me some advice? And they're like, you actually want money, and so I'm going to say no now, right? Like, or whatever, however you're approaching it. So you need to be aware of the circumstance, that you're in. But I realized that it was true, right? And later, as I was running seminars and teaching thousands and thousands of young journalists how to launch their journalism careers, I could see it in myself. People would call me, they'd go to the seminar, they would call me, they'd ask for advice. And I think I got more invested in whether they were doing well with their careers than maybe even they were at some points, right? Well, why does that happen? I remember specific.
Is because you were tracking them? Was it because you were looking for things that you could circle back on? So you always had those as open questions that they needed to answer for you.
There is a bit of that, but here's what I think happens. In this case, I really believed in my ideas. I really believed in the philosophy of what I was teaching in that sort of career philosophy seminar. And every time somebody was kind of following and taking seriously my advice, which almost always worked, it was a test of my ideas. And so
Yeah.
I became the advocate. And it was kind of like the principle I learned from Stephen Covey early on, which was the value in learning something and teaching it to somebody else. There's a memory effect, but it deepens when you become the teacher of something, it deepens your commitment to the content. Right? You're now an advocate for that. You stand with it, and you're more actually likely to do those things. So the things I was advising young people younger than I was to do, the more that I did that, the better I got at it myself, the more committed to it I got, right? So I was getting a value at it that they didn't even understand. But I remember one guy calling me and he was telling me, okay, I've got this big interview, and he called me like on the way to the interview, and then we hung up the phone, and then I was like pacing around. I was like, how's he doing? How's that guy? I wonder. And I was like, wait, I'm the guy. Like I'm in the Machiavelli quote. I'm bound.
Yes.
He has tied me. Like I don't even know this guy very well, and I'm deeply invested in this because I gave advice.
Yes.
And I could see it and feel it. And so
Yes.
if that guy called me and said, hey, I need more advice, I would have been sure.
Right.
So now, if that's an observation about any of us, then we can be aware of it in ourselves, and we can be aware of it to also to the extent of saying, maybe I have a little bit of distance from somebody on my team. We've had field notes about this, people you don't like. Well, there's something that you can admire about them. We've talked about that in field notes, that you can say, well, they're very diligent, right? And so you might say, you know what, I actually need to get a better working relationship here. I'm actually going to do something helpful to this person.
Right.
And that will increase, it might not make them my best friend, but it might increase my liking of them a little bit. But I could also do the same in reverse. And so I think there's about 20 different directions of truth that you can mine out of the principle at the heart of this field, though.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I felt a little concerned about was the notion of, if you're going to do this by asking people for advice, which kind of does the same thing, you need to be careful how you frame what your request is. Because if you are asking people for their advice and you don't take it, then
right.
there's this open thing of like, you have to go back and explain why it is that you thought their advice was bad, right? All that.
Yes, right.
So maybe you should frame it like, can I get your input? You can always go back later when you liked the input and say, I took your advice. You could reframe it later as if it was advice, even though you were just asking for input. But at least if you're framing it in that kind of way, you're not
right.
Making too much of it ahead time. Well,
look at think about the power that you do have in legitimate ways when there's a legitimate ask and what can happen. I mentioned a couple of maybe a week or two ago that I had lunch with a philosopher that I was kind of interested in, who lives not far from Pittsburgh, and I'd read one of her books, and so I went and drove about an hour, and we had lunch. Somebody had connected us, and then I got an email from her, like a week later. And she asked me for kind of like a catalog of like give me 3, 4, 5 books that have been influential to you in the particular area that she's retired, but she does research and a lot of writing.
Right.
She's thinking about doing another book. We had some crossover interest, and she just asked me for that list. Now, I could have been like, okay, yeah, here's the 5 books that have been key to me in that topic area. Well, I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right. I woke up in the middle of the night being, oh, there's another. I had to write down in my notebook so I wouldn't forget to put on the list the book that I would make sure that she had to help her in her research.
Yeah.
And all she did was ask me for a small favor.
Right.
And now I'm like all involved in. She might not even like follow or read any of them.
Yeah.
But it's such an interesting thing, and actually, it doesn't. What I realized was, even if it doesn't help her, let's say that my suggestions are not helpful.
Yes.
The drill of doing it is very helpful to me.
Yes. Oh, and it also is an indicator for her how interested you are in that relationship. Because you could take the homework very seriously. It makes me think that if she really knows what she's doing in relationships, this might be the first foray. She might do this with lots of people, but it's always the first of 7 steps that she has in mind.
Very well could be.
You're willing to be back and forth with her in that kind of a way.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
And you would think most professors probably eventually get to that, especially if they're trying to sort out who are the students who are actually interested in going with me on this subject, and who are the ones who are just interested in grades, right?
Yeah.
And so
right.
it takes on a very rabbinical kind of nature where you have to ask a couple different times in order to really discover how deep the reciprocal nature of your relationship is going to be.
Yes, and these are these are all these are things interesting to explore. And just for the takeaway here in the last minute, remember for the field note, it just says sparingly, sincerely. Right, those are both very important here, and then just right.
Yeah, they are. They were throwaway, but if you don't use these sincerely, people are going to talk about you like you're Ben Franklin or Machiavelli if you're not careful.
Yeah, right. And then what do we do in the field note? We're like, by the way, if you like this field note, send it to another leader, and we'll like you more for doing us this favor, which is probably true. You could share or like this very podcast.
Yeah, I actually did look up the amount of shares. We're actually above our average share rate at this point. So
on that field note,
if we were just using this as a tactic, it kind of worked, but we weren't using it as a tactic. It was just a fun way to wrap this up. So
dynamite.
Yeah. So like all YouTubers say, please like and subscribe. But here
which we have never said actually until this moment. Like we must be very bad at this after 2.5 years. So
right, exactly. All right, thank you.
Thanks,
have a good rest of your Sunday. Bye now.